The most dangerous person on your team isn't the one who lacks skills. It's the one wearing a mask of competence while secretly destroying everything you're building. Hey there, I'm Patrick Lencioni, and today I'm going to reveal something that might keep you up at night: the truth about why some teams succeed while others become living nightmares. What I'm about to share has transformed thousands of organizations, and by the end of this talk, you'll never look at your colleagues the same way again. What would you do if you discovered that someone on your team, maybe someone you trust completely, was systematically undermining everything you're trying to build? The truth is, most of us are working alongside people who are quietly sabotaging our teams every single day. Not because they're evil, but because they're missing something critical. And here's what's truly terrifying: they might not even know they're doing it. Let me tell you a story about a client I'll call Mark. His company was successful by most standards, growing revenue, decent margins. But something felt wrong. There was a heaviness in the office. People smiled, but their eyes didn't. They said the right things in meetings, but nothing changed. Afterward, have you ever walked into a workplace and immediately sensed something was off? That invisible tension that makes your skin crawl slightly. Drop a comment below if you've experienced this workplace sixth sense. I've spent decades working with executive teams, and I've come to a disturbing realization. We've been focused on the wrong things. We obsess over technical skill, credentials, experience, the visible stuff. But that's not what makes or breaks a team. Here's the thing: life has become a team sport. Technology has transformed how we work, connecting us across distances, cultures, and organizations to solve increasingly complex problems. Yet we continue training people, primarily for individual performance and technical skills. This disconnect is creating organizational monsters we don't know how to control. I remember sitting in a boardroom with a leadership team that was imploding. On paper, they were perfect: Harvard MBAs, impressive resumes, technical experts. But watching them interact was like witnessing a psychological horror film. Passive-aggressive comments, information hoarding, subtle undermining. What would you do if you realized the team you'd so carefully assembled was actually destroying value instead of creating it? If every meeting left people more confused and demoralized than before? The CEO pulled me aside afterward and whispered something I'll never forget. "Patrick, I've hired the best people I could find." Why is this happening? Because being a good team player isn't about what you know. It's about who you are. Before I reveal what I told that CEO, a framework that completely transformed his organization, take a second to subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up to this talk, where I'll show exactly how to implement these ideas. Trust me, this will change everything about how you build teams. After studying thousands of teams, the nightmares and the dream teams, I've discovered that ideal team players possess three essential virtues. I call this the HHS framework, and understanding it will allow you to see beneath the surface of workplace dynamics in a way that might disturb you at first. The first virtue is humility. This is the foundation of everything. Without it, nothing else matters. Humble team players think about others more than themselves. They lack excessive ego or concerns about status. They quickly acknowledge their mistakes and contributions of others. They're not focused on themselves, their titles, their perks, their status. But here's where it gets interesting. Humility isn't about lacking confidence or engaging in false modesty. Those are actually forms of deception. True humility is honest self-assessment. Think about the most difficult person you've ever worked with. Were they humble? Or was their ego constantly demanding attention? Share your experience in the comments. I read them all and am fascinated by these workplace dynamics. The second virtue is hunger. Hungry team players are always looking for more things to do, more to learn, more responsibility. They never have to be pushed by a manager because their work ethic and drive for excellence comes from within. I once worked with a brilliant executive who had every credential imaginable. But something was off. While others stayed late solving problems, he was always the first to leave. He contributed the minimum in meetings. His calendar was mysteriously full whenever extra work appeared. His team members began to notice. Resentment grew. Productivity suffered. The culture became infected with a slow-spreading poison of mediocrity. The hunger was missing, and its absence was contagious. The third virtue is smart, but not in the way you might think. When I say smart, I'm not talking about intellectual capacity or technical knowledge. I'm referring to something far more important for team functionality. Being smart is about people intelligence. It's understanding the impact of your words and actions on others. It's saying and doing the right things at the right time in the right way to bring out the best in others. Let me tell you about Alina. She was both humble and hungry, a dedicated worker who never sought the spotlight. But team meetings with her became dreaded events. She would make cutting comments without realizing their impact. She'd interrupt colleagues mid-sentence. She'd send emails that unintentionally offended recipients. Alina was what I call an accidental mess maker. She wasn't malicious, she simply lacked interpersonal awareness. And that blind spot was destroying team cohesion. Now imagine someone who is hungry and smart, but not humble. This is the skillful politician, perhaps the most dangerous team member of all. They know exactly what they're doing as they manipulate situations for personal gain while appearing to serve the team. They're wearing a mask, and by the time you see behind it, the damage is often already done. Or the person who is humble and smart but lacks hunger, the lovable slacker. Everyone enjoys their company, but the work never quite gets finished. Deadlines slip. Quality suffers. And the team enables it because they like the person. So here's the uncomfortable question. Which virtue are you missing? Because none of us perfectly embodies all three all the time. The power of this framework isn't just in identifying others, it's in honest self-assessment. The most transformative moments I've witnessed in organizations happen when team members gather the courage to rank themselves on these virtues, identify their weakest area, and invite teammates to help them improve. I remember facilitating a session where a CEO, let's call him David, admitted to his executive team that while he had hunger and smarts in abundance, his humility needed work. You could hear a pin drop in that room. The vulnerability was palpable. Then something remarkable happened. His team began sharing specific situations where his lack of humility had created problems. Decisions made without input, credit taken for others' ideas, defensiveness when challenged. Instead of becoming defensive, David took notes. He asked questions. He thanked them. And over the following months, the team's performance skyrocketed as David's example of vulnerability spread throughout the organization. What would happen in your organization if people felt safe enough to have these conversations? If you could identify which virtue you need to develop most, what would it be? Let me know in the comments below. Here's the thing that keeps me up at night. We're still primarily hiring, promoting, and developing people based on technical skills and credentials, while ignoring these fundamental virtues that actually determine team success. I've seen organizations transform when they begin prioritizing humility, hunger, and people smarts in their hiring processes. When they design interview questions specifically to assess these virtues. When they make these virtues part of their performance reviews and promotion criteria. One organization I worked with completely reinvented their hiring process around HHS, humility, hunger, and smarts. They developed behavioral interview questions designed to reveal these virtues. They checked references specifically about these traits. They created onboarding processes that reinforced their importance. The results were stunning. Turnover dropped by 40%. Employee engagement scores rose dramatically. But most importantly, the feeling in the office changed. The invisible tension disappeared. People began to trust one another. Innovation flourished. The nightmare was replaced by something beautiful. I'll tell you something I rarely share. Early in my career, I was the skillful politician. I had hunger and smarts, but my humility was underdeveloped. I was focused on my own success, my own visibility. And while I achieved certain markers of success, I left damage in my wake. It wasn't until a brave colleague held up a mirror and showed me what I was doing that I began to change. That painful conversation transformed not just my career, but my life. The question isn't whether you want to be an ideal team player. The question is whether you're willing to look honestly at yourself, identify which virtue you need to develop, and do the uncomfortable work of growth. Because the alternative is to continue wearing a mask, pretending to be something you're not. And deep down, knowing you're contributing to the nightmare instead of building something better. In my next talk, I'll show you exactly how to implement this framework in your organization, the specific questions to ask in interviews, the exercises to do with your team, and how to create a culture where these virtues flourish. But for now, ask yourself, which virtue do I need to develop? And what is one step I could take tomorrow to begin that journey? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and remember, the most dangerous person on your team might be the one you see in the mirror every morning. Until next time, this is Patrick Lencioni. Thanks for watching.